as always. All right, let's get into this shit. Yeah. So the last version of Totoro that I have, I can't open the file anymore somehow, so I have to roll back a little bit, which is fine. I mean, we're just gonna proceed. I'm not gonna do it again in this tutorial, obviously. So today, oh my god, I gotta mute the notifications of the chat real quick. It's getting annoying. Give me a second. Alright, that should be it. Alright, so Totoro, last time we converted the particles into an actual particle system. That is something that rolled back for me, so I don't have it anymore. I should just be able to just convert that real quick. There we go. And we have a few more things we actually gotta take care of. Alright, so what I'm gonna do is, while we're gonna be working on Totoro, let me get the microphone a little bit closer. While we're working on Totoro, I will just hide these curves for a second. And the teeth as well, we have to parent those to the actual Totoro mesh. Somehow they got lost as well. I think I had the smiling mouth shape and now it's back to the little one. So something got lost here. It's fine, doesn't matter. I'm just gonna hide all those cubes. And by the way, if you want them to be more organized, you can select them all. Select all of your cubes by holding Shift. And you can just go to your 3D viewport, press M, and you can move this to a new collection. Just call this teeth, for example. And then you can just collapse that little view, and you can disable them all together by just hitting this little check icon right there, and then you just disable your teeth. If you want to do that, then this is how you do it. So you can now just move them together if you feel like they're in the wrong place, for example, just sticking through your mesh. You have to make sure that the initial position before we parent it to anything is at least proper, right? So whether you do this in the smile mode, so with a wide face, or if you're doing it in this mode, for example, where your mouth is more closed, it doesn't really matter because we're going to be working with shape keys anyway, right? And there's another thing. If I press Alt H to unhide this, we have our armature, of course, which also controls the mesh. But as you know, we haven't really made an armature for the head section that opens the mouth, for example, or closes the eyes. And that is something that you'll have to decide for yourself, whether or not you want to do that with shape keys or with an armature. So if you're going to be working for games, for example, then everything pretty much has to be done with the armature of the game as well. For example, Fortnite right now, if you want to add a character there, you will have to match the armature that can be used for the animations that they already have in their library, for example, which means you have to match the armature. So all of these bones, you'll just have to pretty much customize it for Fortnite. And in their case, I think all the animations, the eyes, the mouth, the fingers, stuff like that, they're all done with actual armature. But if you're going to be working in Blender, then sticking to shape keys is actually very, very nice and very interesting because it works very smooth. So if we're working with shape keys, then we can actually really just disband the entire head area that we have to rig if we aren't working with shape keys. So let me hide this fur. Give me a second. The curves. There we go. So if I go to my armature, go to pose mode, and if I actually rotate my neck, for example, then the teeth and stuff isn't really moving with it. All right. So how can we actually achieve that without having to parent them to our, for example, armature? Right, which will be very easy to do. We can just parent this to the head bone, but in that case, they will not follow the mouth, for example. So if we open this mouth in, for example, sculpt mode, which is something we can do for shape keys. So if we open this like that, then the teeth will stay in place at exactly the same point. And there goes the eyes as well. So there's actually a method that we can use. And let me go back a little bit. Let's see. We can use vertex parents, as you can see right here. And that is something that is incredibly useful whenever you want stuff to stick to an exact location on your mesh. Alright, for example, I've used it a few times where I have, for example, an outfit, a long jacket with a pocket, and there was like an empty bottle in there. I think it was for the Pepe one, the poor one, where he had a bottle in his jacket. And I had to actually move it, animate it into the right position. And in that case, it's just very easy to stick your object to a vertex. So it sticks to exactly the same place on a mesh, which is amazing. So for example, we can link all teeth together to one vertex, but we can also just link the top row of teeth to a vertex, for example, and the bottom row of teeth to another vertex. We can also link each teeth individually, which is something you wouldn't normally do, really, because the teeth are usually locked into your skull pretty much, so they won't be able to move independently without some external force, somebody hammering you in the teeth, for example. So I'll show you how to make a vertex parent first, right? So you're going to select your objects, and right now we have a few modifiers going on. We have a bevel and a mirror. Whenever we're going to be parenting and animating stuff like that, it's always good to check which modifiers are enabled and what modifiers can actually mess up your work, right? So mirror modifiers are amazing, but they can also be very tricky. For example, we had it before where we worked with UV maps, and then if we have a mirror of Totoro, the UV map is going to be in exactly the same place, and that gives UV overlaps, which is something that will not work with geometry nodes, right? So right now, I'm satisfied with the teeth, so I'm just going to apply this mirror, right? I'm going to swipe that on top of the bevel, and then Control A on top of it, right? The bevel is something that can't just be there. That's something we can edit. We can make this bigger. We can make this smaller on the go. And I'm just going to press right mouse, set origin, and I'm just going to set the origin to my geometry, just so that it is nicely centered. All right, now let's select Totoro and go to the object data properties. And let's just make sure that we haven't got any shape keys enabled or any shape keys messing up our work. Seems to be fine. So we can now select our teeth, for example, hold shift, select our mesh, press tab, and then select the vertex we want pretty much. For example, let's see the one that is in the center, perhaps this one, right? So press Control P, and then we can make this a vertex parent. There we go. And this means that if we move this vertex itself, we can move the teeth with it as well. All right, you can see it happening. And that also means that if we are in skull mode, for example, and I drag that entire section down, then those teeth are going to be moving with it as well. All right, that is nice. And you really have to make sure that you pick the right vertex, right? If you pick, for example, the lip vertex right there in the front, for example, you pick this one, then the teeth are going to be moving if you move your lips as well. All right, so if you want, for example, your character to smile, then the lips are going to move differently than the teeth, right? You're going to be seeing more of those teeth and stuff like that. So it's not that nice to parent them to the lips, for example, right? So anything you want to move independently from those teeth, don't parent it to that. So that's why I chose something that's quite there in the back. Preferably, we will pick anything behind the teeth, right? So we can just do that as well. So just rotate your camera so we are in the mouth of the Totoro. There we go. So we're now in the inside looking out. Beautiful. Select our teeth. Just hit Alt P and just clear that parent for a second. And now hold Shift. Select your Totoro. Hit Tab to go into edit mode. And then just select like a vertex somewhere more on the inside. Perhaps this one. Or let's go with this one. Control P. Make vertex parent. Right. Now, if you want to make gums, for example, for your character, it's not something that I'm going to do now. It's something that's very basic. You basically model the gums of your character. On the inside as a separate object, like your grandma's, and what's it called? Like the fake teeth. All right, that's pretty much what you're going to be modeling in that case as well. And then you attach the teeth to that, and then you will attach the gums to either your armature or with a vertex parent that I showed you right here as well. Right, so I think I parented it, and now we can go to sculpt mode. We can move the lips, but as soon as we move the inner part of the Totoro, you're going to see the teeth are going to moving as well. Right, so it can move through your mesh, of course, but you can just move that more in. And the inner vertex, just move that more in, and they'll be moving out as well. So you can see that it's quite customized. Now we can still move the lips separate from the teeth, for example. And that is something that's very useful. And now if your vertex is getting moved by anything else, then, by pretty much anything, as long as the vertex moves, the teeth are going to move with it as well. So if we go to pose mode here, rotate this head, for example, then those bottom teeth are going to moving perfectly with that vertex, right? So we only parented those bottom teeth, of course. So that is just something that we will have to take care of. All right, now you can see that it doesn't really follow the rotation of the head. That is something we could fix with a constraint. But I think for now we have had enough of the armature for a second. And we may move back to tweaking some of this stuff later on. But I really want to get past this and get into some environment stuff as well. All right, so first things first, I know Maple, I know we need a tail, right? Something we haven't done yet. Something that doesn't need to be done right away, but we can make this. We can make this work very quickly. Let me quickly search for the tail Totoro has. I have absolutely no clue. I think it's like a long, stretched ellipse, right? Wait, am I rugging? I think my no, but it's some stuff that is gonna be repetitive, right? For example, I can now parent all of these other teeth through the mesh as well, but it's just repetitive work. You can do that yourselves. You know how to do it. All right, so Maple, you said in beaver teeth or beaver tail? I'm trying to find a picture of the Totoro from this side. Alright, so it's basically just a stretched little ellipse, I guess. Yeah, alright, we're just gonna make something. You can make your own custom tail if you want. Right, so let's do it. Shift A, mesh. Let's start off with, I would have picked a UV sphere, but since we're gonna be working with a simple shape and we wanna stick to quads mostly, alright, then we're just gonna be getting the, where is it? The round cube. And then we're gonna up that radius all the way to 1. And then, to 1. And then we basically have a sphere, but with better geometry, right? So that's always nice. And I'm just gonna scale this down with S. And get this into the right proportions. Where are my screencast keys, by the way? Let's enable that. There we go. And shade that smooth, right mouse, shade smooth. And then we can go to sculpt modes and do some witchcraft here if you want. Let's enable the X symmetry on the top right there. And let's just pretty much swipe this out a little bit so we get some kind of a shape tail. I still don't 100% know what kind of tail he has. It looks like each image has like a different type of tail. I don't know, maybe it's a little bit longer. Something like that. And it doesn't matter at all that it is not part of the original Totoro mesh. It doesn't matter at all that it is intersecting with the mesh. At least not for what we're going to be using it for. I'm going to add a subdivision modifier and I'm just going to set that to 2. There we go. Right, so the reason why I'm doing the tail at the final part is because I know exactly what I'm going to be using this tutorial for. I'm not going to be exporting this for any games whatsoever. So we can just keep it like this. If you're going to be making this for games, then you can also keep it as a separate object. But it will be a little bit nicer to have it as a part of the original Totoro, which means that you will have to include it in the Totoro mesh just by extruding your mesh, right? We got quite a nice, decent geometry to work with. And then you have just got some weight painting left to do, right, to add that weight groups of the tail to the armature. But we're just going to do it separately, right? We can still parent it to the armature, still make it animated, stuff like that, nothing to worry about. All right, so let's just first take care of a little bit of hair, right? So this now looks like an egg, which is quite fitting because it's almost Easter, and that's exactly why I made it that shape, of course. We are just going to go to that particle system tab, hit the plus sign, and we're just going to add some quick hair and just reduce that length. All right, reason why I'm not using geometry nodes for this is because this is a very easy shape. It's round and nothing happens. There are no eyes, no arms, no mouth, no ears, nothing hard. Hair all over the place. Right, so I'm just using the easiest method to set this up, add some hair length, and then I'm going to hit the interpolated button in the children's section just to add some more hair. Let's set this at like 30. And let's just go to the particle edit on the top left to do some grooming. Hit Alt Z to enable X-ray mode. That way we're going to be able to sculpt both sides at the same time. And then just select your comb brush. Alright, so let's just comb that to the right. Let's make a nice looking tail. Egg. Something like that. And if you want, you can add a little fluffy pointy bit on the end there by just going over to the length brush there. And remember to set that on grow instead of shrink, otherwise you're going to be removing hairs. And just make this nice and a little bit longer to create some beautiful chaotic hair there. Right, so I'm just going to swipe this, groom it, be the barber you always want to be. Let's go to top view. Remember, only one side view is not enough, right? Looking from the top, this is incredibly boring. So let's swipe this to the left. Swipe this front part a little bit more to the center. Let's do the same for the right part there. Make it nice and pointy in the end. Beautiful. Now you remember how particle system works, right? We can add randomization. If we have children, we can, for example, enable some clumping. Swipe that to the right so we can get this nice looking clumping vibe. And we can enable some roughness to just get a little bit of noise in there going. Alright, decrease the size a little bit perhaps, so it gets more rough. There we go. That's looking nice already. Alright, so I'm just gonna stick to this. I'm not sure if this is a tail or not, we'll see later. And let's just enable the hair on Totoro real quick, so we can do a little vibe check. Let's see if it matches the actual hair of Totoro. Not bad. Let's move this down a little bit. Not sure. Something like that. And now we can pretty much just select our tail. And let's see. Do we want to add a bone? We can even make this tail a little bit animated as well, right? So if we add another armature, Shift A, armature. And let's just go for a single bone. Let's go to the armature tab, like the green little waving man there. And let's just select in front. That means our bone will always be visible. Let's swipe that more to our tail. Hit tab, edit mode, select that top part and just G and move that more to the back there. Now there's a very easy way to just turn this into more bones. Left click to select, right mouse subdivide. Now you got a little panel on the bottom left that is covered by my mouse thingy. And we could just increase the number of cuts. For example, if you want 3 bones controlling how the tail moves, then this is completely fine. Alright, beautiful. Let's go to object mode, select our tail, hold shift, select our armature, Ctrl P, and let's just parent it with automatic weights. There we go. Let's see if it works. Select our armature, pose mode. Let's just rotate this a little bit. Alright, it works, but our hair is not connected. Let's go to object mode, go to the tail, let's go to the modifiers, right? Usually when something isn't working properly, or if something doesn't move with your mesh, then it is a modifier issue. Alright, for example, we have the particle system in front of the armature, which means that the particle system is going to be applied first, and then the movements of the armature. So just drag this up there. And let's just see if that works or if we have to do one more step. Alright, so this already moves nicely now, right? So we can see we have our tail moving with the bone structure and the hair stays on top of it very nicely. Amazing. Alright, so we can now just parent this armature to a different armature. Or we can parent it to a single bone. All right, if we select this armature that we have selected right now, and we go to the bone section, actually, do we? Now we can go to the object properties, and then go to the relations panel, and if you've got a parent section, and we can just drop the other armature, and then we can set this to a bone. That means that we can select a specific bone we want to parent it to, and I am not sure what I called all of these bones, so I'm going to select the bones, hit tab, and just select the one I want to parent it to. Probably, let's see, maybe this middle one actually. I think we're going to be moving the tail down a bit, so I'm going to select the lowest bone. I'm going to press F2 just to see what I named this bone. Pelvis. Beautiful. Hit tab, go back to our bone structure. Let's move it first before we're making any drastic parentings. And then just move it to where you would have the tail. I think something like this will be decent enough at least. Alright, and let's just select the parent bone to be the pelvis. Now it's gonna move a little bit out of place. That always happens for some reason if you're connecting bones, but we can just move this manually back to the right position, and then it will be parented. Right, so now it's part of the same mesh, and we have to do the same for Totoro, by the way, for the hair. You can see that if I move my Totoro, that bone, the tail moves with it. Amazing. Alright, so it's all part of the same armature without them being the same object. Isn't that nice? Alright, I'm going to select Totoro real quick. Go to that modifier properties. And actually, those are the curves. Totoro main is what we need. Remember, we still have those curves of the geometry nodes we made just as a little backup there. And if you are at Totoro main, oh my god, that was a difficult word to say. We can just swipe the curves in front of the armature as well, like we did for the tail. Right, so now we have a hairy Totoro with a hairy tail that all moves together nicely. Beautiful. Let's hide that, the tail as well. Let's hide the particle system. And let's just move this a little bit closer to the mesh, right? They are almost connected, something like that. Now the beauty of working with hair is that weird overlapping sections like this, they don't matter. Hair covers up everything. All small mistakes, hair covers it, right? So if you know from the start, we knew from the start we're going to be working with hair. Stuff like this doesn't matter, right? It just doesn't. Hair covers everything nicely. And it means we can just make some shortcuts. And you will learn at some point that making shortcuts in art, 3D modeling, stuff like that, it's always nice. It skips the repetitiveness. It skips a little bit of the work you'd have to do otherwise. And you can just make it easier on yourself and just make sure to work efficiently. Alright? That's just something you will learn whenever you know more about Blender as well, right? You'll know what to get away with and what you can't get away with. Stuff like that. Very beautiful. Right, now, let's parent those nails, shall we? I think that's the only thing left that is not parented to anything. Right? And the rest of the teeth, but you can do that yourself. Right, so the actual nails, I'm going to move them into the exact positions that I want them. Right there. Right? I make those little out carvings there for a reason. So we're going to be moving these nails exactly into them. Now the reason why this moved in the first place is because we parent something to an armature and there is automatic weight painting. Right? We parented the Totoro to the armature, and it's always going to move, like the outer parts are going to move slightly. Right? That always happens if you parent it. It's annoying, but it happens. Alright, but we could just hit Alt-H, and we could just do two things right now. Remember what I told you before. We've got the vertex parent, which would work nice here, but we also have the armature parent, which is even better right now, because in that case we won't have to mess around with the rotations and stuff, right? So what I'm going to do is select our nails there, hold shift, select our armature, press tab, select that bone, that top bone there, the hand bone, press tab, Control P, and then just parent it to that bone. Alright, that should be it. Let's check it out. Removing our armature, and we're actually not moving our Totoro, looks like. Damn it. Let's hide these curves. Let's see why this happens. Perhaps my Totoro is no longer parented. I told you guys I had a little rollback here because my latest file doesn't open, so I am not sure where this one left off. Maybe my Totoro is not parented at all anymore. What's happening? Was it you, Maple? God damn it. No. It is. It's always annoying when you open an older file. I have absolutely no clue where this one stopped and where I left it off. But that's fine. You should still have it parented to your armature, so I'm not going to do that again. Alright, instead, let's just continue with a little bit of environment work, right? I think it's time we finally get into something different. We got our Totoro. It is ready to actually move into positions, alright? At least yours is. Mine isn't parented anymore for some reason. But I'll fix that in the meanwhile when we get to the next tutorial. But today, we can focus a little bit more on actual environments, alright? So, how do you start that off? It can be quite challenging to actually think about environments, let alone 3D model them. Right? There's a lot to choose from, there's a lot to model, and there's a lot to know as well. How do you approach it? Quite easily. All you need is an idea in your mind, right? Whether that's going to be Totoro in the city, Totoro on the boat, Totoro in a cave, Totoro in an airplane, doesn't matter. As long as you have the idea in your mind, then you are starting off right. Okay, so I'm gonna hide this plane for a second. That's not gonna be our actual environment. We could, for example, make this environment of Totoro where we actually have a tree. But that's gonna take a lot of time because we have to sculpt that entire tree, or we have to buy a 3D model, which is both not something that is really beginner friendly, I'd say. However, we didn't really get into sculpting yet, so we may just do a little tree here. Shall we do it? Yeah, let's fucking do it. Let's just go for this scene that we have right here. Let's make that.
Let's do.
Maple. You're free to do whatever you want, man. I'm just teaching you what you need to know.
That's why Maple created the bot, right? On this one.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let me actually just give you a short introduction in sculpting and the tools that we use for sculpting. And then next week we can sculpt a nice looking tree. All right, a tree trunk with some detail. And I think the environment actually has everything left that we didn't really get into yet. It has some volumetrics for the clouds. It's a lot of fun to make. It has a tree. And it has geometry nodes, right, for the section on the side there. Water. It has everything. We're not going to make these children. That's a lot of work. Right, so let's press Shift A. And let's go to Mesh. And I'm going to start this off again with a round cube. Right, and I'm just going to move this to the side. Whenever I'm starting on a different object from a scene, I like just moving it to a different side as well in Blender, just so things don't overlap, just so I don't get distracted from things on the side there. All right, so just move this to the side a little bit. There we go. Shade that smooth. And to get this started, I'm just going to subdivide this one time. 1, 1, and hit Ctrl A to apply that. And let's go to sculpt mode. Now we already sculpted a little bit, right? We use G to move things around, remember? But there is a lot of different tools to be used, right? I can even scroll down, and there's so much stuff we can actually get into. And we will. Alright, so there's a little bit of basic stuff that is nice to know. First things first, we go to the tool tab on the top right. This is where we get the information of the brush that we are holding. For example, now we have to grab one. It shows the actual details we can change for the grab brush. If we go to the actual draw brush, we get some different settings. We have textures that we can use as well. Now in Blender 3.5, I'm not sure if you've downloaded it yet, but it's amazing. Please download it as soon as possible so we can all stick to the same version of Blender. They actually now have amazing displacement maps that you can use. If you watch the video of Blender 3.5, you see them having an air displacement map, a air stencil that they basically just pop on an object like this, and there will be an air there, right? Stuff that ZBrush already had for a long time. Blender is incorporating it as well now, which means that we won't at some point have to buy different programs, but we can do it all in Blender. Hopefully, fingers crossed. All right, so this is also the most important section where we can enable Dino Topo. We already did that at some point, I think, but if we enable this, we can actually add a new geometry to our object. All right, which means that if I now draw on this side right there, we're gonna be adding new topology, where if we disable this and draw, at some point the geometry is just no longer detailed enough, and we get all of these squares and faces that just lack in detail, right? So I'm going to enable this, and if I now draw on top, it's going to actually add more geometry there, which means that we can now draw out of that again. All right, I'm going to Control Z in the hopes that I can get this back to a sphere. There we go. Dino Topo is incredibly useful whenever you feel like you are going to remesh things later, right? If you're going to be making a character and you're going to make a very detailed, this is not detailed at all, but it doesn't matter. If this is a detailed face, for example, and you're sculpting, you want to add details on the go, right? You don't want to subdivide stuff and go back and forth. You just want to be as organic as you can to get the best shape that you can. And then afterwards, you're going to retopologize it, right? Retopologizing is something you do to remove some of the geometry to get a better performance. If you're going to be working for games, stuff like that, you will need the lowest of the resolution of a mesh, pretty much, that you can get with the details still in place, right? Just to make sure that your game doesn't blow up computers, stuff like that, right? So that is why, in this instance, we're going to... Hello? Mm-hmm. Yes, that is exactly what I just was explaining, right? We can use Dino Topo, but if you want to use your mesh for games and or anything else that has to be animated, then you have to retopologize it. And retopologizing is going over your mesh with a new mesh that has better topology, right? For example, if I mess this up now, and now the geometry is all fucked up, what you do to retopologize is you add a new object, for example, and I'm going to move this to our mesh. So this is going to be our retopologized version with better geometry. But what we can do now is just go into edit mode, press M, and I'm just going to merge all of this at the center, and I'm going to enable my snapping on the top there, the little magnet icon, and set that to face. And now if I move my vertex, it's going to snap to my face. What this means is that we can now just create new topology that snaps to our dirty topology, right? I can extrude my vertex, and we can set this object view, right? Let's go to the object viewport display, and let's set this in front so we can always see it. We can now make the topology ourselves, right? For example, we can extrude this, and we can actually find the right kind of patterns, for example, like this. If this is going to be a loop, we can make it happen. And then all you have to worry about is to make squares, right? Make quads. That is one quad. And then here it's two quads, right? 4 vertices, 1 quad. Beautiful. And you can just keep extruding that until you have more and more quads. And this basically is the process that people use to basically fill up their dirty mesh with a better mesh, right? That's also what people do with faces. If they sculpt it, they're going to go over the mesh with a new mesh to get the geometry that they actually need, right? So that is why you can get away with Dino Topo if you want to go ahead and retopologize it after. If you don't need If you, for example, don't need to animate this, or you don't need this to be in games, you just want to use this in Blender, then there's no real reason to retopologize it anyway, which means that we can still work with DynoTopo, as long as you don't crank up the detail too high. Now, in a perfect world, you will have a nice mesh. But let's be honest, we are all cutting corners at some point. If you have a static object and you don't have to worry about the system performance, right? You have a little Blender scene and you just want to create a quick object, all right? You don't want to worry about geometry because you don't have to. And you just want it as quick as possible with the detail that you have in mind. You can just use DynoTopo. And that's what I'm going to use with this as well, right? I'm going to create a tree. This tree is not going to be moving, maybe a little bit, right? Maybe a little bit wind or something like that, but it's not going to like bend the trunk there. It's not going to bend a branch all of a sudden. Maybe it's going to fall off, but it's a different method. Sorry?
Yeah. Just one thing for everyone. Let's say you make this high poly and it's too much. You have some tools that can reduce it. It's not good topology, but that will just reduce the amount of polygons, so you can just smooth it again. So if you went a little bit overboard with your poly count, you can just do the modifier on it and be done with it, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, great tip. It is. There's actually a few remeshing things that come with Blender, and number one is a modifier. All right, we can go to add modifier, remesh. Remeshes your geometry. You have 4 different ways to do this. Voxel, sharp, smooth blocks. I usually use voxel or smooth, and they can basically reduce your topology to something lower resolution depending on the settings that you have here, right? The one thing this doesn't really do is take the shapes of your mesh into account. It's just going to try to fill your mesh with the method that you select here. Now there's also a different method, works a little bit better, I think, and it's hidden in the object data properties. And there at the bottom is a remesh option as well. And I will set this to quads usually, and we can hit the quadriflow remesh. Wow. And then we have to give it a number of faces that we want to work with. And we can just set this to, well, we can just try out, for example, 2000. Right, let's see. Now, if you have a sharp mesh, you can hit preserve sharp. It's going to try to really stick to the sharp corners and stuff of your mesh as well. And you can preserve your mesh boundaries. It's always something I actually enable all of the except symmetry. If you have symmetry, enable it. If you don't. And now we can just hit OK, and it's going to remesh it. And you can see you get quite a decent geometry. All right, now this also lags a little bit because there is no real. It still doesn't really take these shapes into account, right? For example, right here on this bump, we would have liked a little bit of a better geometry, a higher resolution. So that's stuff that it doesn't really take into account. Now there's also paid remeshing options. For example, you have the quadriflow remesher, which it is incredible. If we use the same quad count and remesh that, give it a second, then it does actually take those little details more into account. All right, so that's just stuff to worry about later. But there is a lot of options. There's a lot of free options as well. Also external programs. I think maybe you, Bullvader, know a little more about those external programs that remesh than I do.
I mostly do it by hand, but the one you just showed, the quad remesher, is one of the better ones in terms of polyflow and stuff. It's actually pretty good. But yeah, it depends on the object. Sometimes I do it by hand. If
Exactly.
it's needed.
Yeah, no, thanks for the tip there. Definitely something to keep in mind. Remeshing is always an option. Like you said, by hand is most of the times the best solution because you can really define where you want your geometry yourself. It's always the most time consuming as well. And in my opinion, it's quite a boring job. So whenever you can use a remesher that gets you the results that you want, by all means, go for it. All right, let me actually show a few sculpt tools that we will be using and then call this a day because we have been going at this for quite a while now. Right, draw, that's what we have just been using. Now there's a function in Blender which just lets you hold control and it will basically do the opposite, right? It removes your geometry. So you can just draw with a left click, hold control and left click to just do the opposite, all right? And you hold shift, left click, and it's gonna smoothen out the mesh. Beautiful, amazing. All right, and then you've got some different ones. You've got clay. Clay is very nice to get hard geometry top of your geometry. You can increase the strength there. It's very nice to add some very rough basic shapes of your mesh, right? For example, if you want an eyeball here, you can try to draw that. Hold shift, create a little hole there, and just try to make that happen first, and then you can refine those details later. Right, it works very nicely. There's a few more. Clay therm didn't really use that. Inflate is very, very useful. In case you just want some new geometry somewhere very quickly, or in case you want some thicker areas, you can just draw it, and it will basically inflate that part. Right, basically adding a little balloon on top of your surface. Now, the way I use this the most is in combination with the snake hook. And the snake hook is this little yellow one, and it is incredible, right? And that's something that will be very useful for this tree as well. If I increase the size to about the same size as my starting thing, or maybe a little bit bigger, and I draw this out, it's gonna move the geometry, and we can actually make a shape out of this. All right, so you can see we already have pretty much the shape of a tree trunk. Now, if you want this to be thicker, you can either draw on it, which is going to be very annoying, because if I draw on this mesh, it's going to move pretty much the entire mesh for some reason as well, because we have got a large brush. But if we hit the inflate, it's actually going to inflate the entire tree trunk there. So if we need some more thickness, we can make that happen with the inflate brush, right? We also have blob. The crease is very incredible as well. We can use it for trees. Let's say we want a little indent right here at this part. And we can just keep drawing nice lines there. And it's going to pretty much make a crease there. It's also very useful for clothes. For anything that basically needs a nice looking crease there. And you can increase your brush if you want this crease to be coming out of a bigger space. And you can just refine this to smaller to make this a really deep carve, for example. You can make side carves, for example, right there. Something that just goes off to the side. You can really go crazy with this one. Beautiful, right? We're already making a tree trunk. And what else? The pinch, something I use a lot as well. That is for hard edges. For example, we have a rounded edge here. If I want this to be harder, if you want a hard shadow, for example, or if this has to be a sharp corner, doesn't really matter. You can just pinch that geometry more together and you'll get a very nice hard edge there. All right, very nice, very nice, very nice. All right, what else? And we should be able to hold control and actually get the opposite result here as well. Doesn't work well with the pinch, but with the crease one, it works nicely. We can hit control and we can actually add a little bit of a little ridge there as well, which can be very useful to just get some nice looking sharp edges on some different places. All right, that's already looking nice. What else? What else? We've got the elastic deform. I'm not using that a lot, but it basically means that we can drag stuff out. We can make it bend more, bend less. It's basically the grab tool, but a little bit different. And then we've got the cloth brush. This is a very nice one, actually. Something you can use for, you guessed it, clothes or anything else that has to have folds, wrinkles, stuff like that. For example, I can drag and do it right here. And if I just go in circles, for example, you can already see it's getting nice and cloth-like. And this all depends on the movement that you make with your brush, right? You can also move this from side to side. It's going to add some different wrinkles. You can really drag this in, drag the other side in as well. It's going to try to follow the actual physics of what you're doing, right? And for example, I'm squeezing this in, which means this part is going to get a little bit more stretched, and this is all going to get more folded together, right? You can see those folds happening very beautifully. So that is something that works very nice. If you, for example, need a cloth piece and you don't have the time to run simulations, you can totally fake it, right? Very nicely. What else? The rest of this I haven't really used a lot. You have a mask, which is quite useful if you want specific places of your mesh, for example, to stay in place or specific spots to move out. I can draw a mask here. There is a shortcut to invert this, which is probably Control I. There we go. Damn. And we can just, for example, grab the snake hook, and we could just completely drag only that part out now, right? To create a nice little additional branch, for example. Very nice. All right. Now Alt M should clear that. There we go. Object mode, shade this smooth. Oh, shade smooth. And then we already have a nice foundation of our tree trunk right there. Something that is a nice foundation. Okay, so for today, we're just gonna stop that right there. In the next one, we're gonna be tweaking the branch a little bit, create that tree, and we can get started on some of those leaves as well. Now remember, I said this before, at some point you're not gonna make trees ever again, because it is a pain in the ass and you can just download them. But I think it's good to know at least the basics of how you create something like that, because it's quite interesting. Alright, so, well, thanks for watching, and that was it for this time. Are there any questions?
I can just imagine that people are really bullish about it. Because I always love sculpting, seeing you just pull out the branch and it's super cool. You can really quickly create something and then without actually worrying about quality, just be creative.
Hell yeah. Totally. It is. Sculpting is incredible for creating organic stuff like this. If you don't have to worry about the geometry for a second, you can just create whatever you want and worry about the rest later. Stuff like trees, organic stuff. Faces, organic stuff. You can even use it for rocks very well, right? Remember, I showed you the brush for that as well, which is, let's see, we can use the clay brush, for example, and we can make some stuff a little bit harder. All right, so remember, control, holding control. Let's smoothen this a little bit. And then you can, for example, just use that pinch brush to get some of those hard edges. And that also means that you can use this for like rocky surfaces a little bit as well, stuff like that. And you can download tons and tons of other brushes as well. For example, there are brushes that are just going to add scales to your mesh, right? Dragon scales, for example. Skin bumps, right? Pores in your skin, stuff like that. There are all brushes for stuff like that as well, which is something that we will use in the future to create, for example, a bump map for skin, right? Pores, little bumps in your skin, little imperfections, stuff like that. We can just sculpt it right here. For example, if this is a skin, we can add a nice detailed, and we need a dino topology for this. So go to the tool section on the top. Dino topo is enabled. We can just draw a little bump there. And this adds a lot of geometry, of course, because we're working detailed. But if we convert this into a displacement map or a bump map, then we can just get the same shadows of this little bump. That is just all in a texture, right? So that is something very nice. And that's a reason why we sculpt in high detail, for example, as well for characters and stuff like that, because it allows us to add nice little details that we can convert into a bump map or a displacement map that allows us to get those details even later on a lower poly mesh. Right? That's nice.
I wanted to add to that. You can even, let's say you have like a plane, create like a rock texture on it. You can make the maps out of it and then make a texture to it. So you have custom rock texture. So you first sculpt it and then take it down to the texture and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one for sure. Amazing. Yeah, so you can use different kind of objects to get your displacement maps out of, whether that's going to be a plane, a cube, sphere, stuff like that. And fun thing is, you can also turn them into brushes. All right, so you can turn, for example, like Bullflade Z, you can make a rock displacement that you sculpt yourself, and then turn that into a brush alpha or displacement map that you can then just use to sculpt more rocks, and that's going to be. Mhm. I use both. I don't really have a preference, but whenever I get into more of a detailed kind of object, for example, this one, I don't really have to get anything perfect because it's a tree, right? But if I'm going to sculpt something that needs perfection, then I usually switch to my digital tablet, and that allows me to just really get those nice lines in. That just looks a little bit less blocky than when you do it with the mouse. You're welcome. Anything else? Nothing else. All right, then we can just call this a day. Tomorrow we've got our coffee shop coming up, Twitter space. Afterwards, I'm gonna be having a space with Liquid and CB, just a little artist space. So if you're interested in that one, pop into the coffee shop so we can all have a nice chat. And afterwards, we can have another chat about some art-related topics. It's gonna be fun. So I guess I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good evening or day, whatever it is for you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nino.
Yeah, you could just pause, but you're going to Dave's tomorrow anyway, right? Just ring the door and I'll open. Oh yeah, no, I don't want people in my house. I'm kidding. Yeah, fuck him.
So if anyone couldn't tell, we have Nino emojis now that you can throw on your screen during the Blender class.
Oh my god. This is getting out of control.
Thank you, Nino. That was a great class.
Thank you, sir.
I'm gonna
What?
make a Nino brush. Yes.
Yeah.
No.
Hell yeah. It is black and white anyway, right? So we can just make a film map out of it.
All I'm gonna say, Nino, is after we started making memes of your faces on it, you got an article written about you like the next day. So.
Fucking hell. I should just change my face. You don't even know if this is my actual face. I might just have picked this from like Google. Or
I met you in person, sir.
No, you did. That was my that was another guy that just. All right, I may be in the coffee shop later today for some fun, but I'm gonna take off for now.
Yo, have a good day, guys.
Have a good day.